What character from the hit TV show Friends once played a fashion buyer?
See, that's a really funny one because I think for so many of us, that's the first real introduction to the buying profession we even had is Miss Rachel Green. And even though it was a comedy version of the profession, it was definitely, for a lot of us, what gave us the impetus to try to check out the profession.
Today, we are going to be discussing fashion buying. Maybe all you know about buying is what you learned from Friends, or maybe you are a fashion buyer about to hit your next seasonal cycle. At WGSN, we have just launched an exciting new platform for buyers, which we'll be digging into today, including how our AI predictive models work and how buyers are using WGSN intelligence to make better buying decisions. So get ready for a great discussion of what it means to be a fashion buyer in 2024 and how changes in the industry are reshaping that role now and into the future. From AI data forecasting to the TikTok hype cycle, we'll be getting into the nitty-gritty of how the industry decides which trends to back and why. Welcome to the Create Tomorrow podcast. I'm your host, Francesca Muston, VP of WGSN Fashion. Joining me to discuss this topic is Monisha Klar, Director of Fashion. Hi, Monisha. I'm excited to get into today's topic with you.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you. Right, so let's get started. So we talked a little bit there about Rachel from Friends, obviously like a nice 1990s reference there. And the fashion industry has changed unbelievably during that time, but so is the role of the buyer, right? So do you want to talk to us a little bit about how that role of the buyer has really changed during that time period?
Sure. I think, originally the role of the buyer, what made somebody kind of a good buyer at the time was just somebody who was really a tastemaker. So somebody who had kind of like an impeccable sense of style and was just able to kind of maintain the pulse on the consumer. And sometimes they were right and sometimes they were not so right. But what really has kind of evolved over the years is buyers have been able to take in much more information. So, back in the day of Rachel Green, we were doing purchase orders on carbon copy paper or by fax. And you certainly were not getting any sort of sales information back from your stores. Now with the advent of the internet, things are coming back instantaneously. But I also think in addition to kind of the technology kind of evolving the profession, there's so many more inputs these days, right? So buyers used to be kind of like front row at the catwalks, and that's how they would kind of get that first glance at the season. However, now catwalks are live streamed these days, so everybody is getting that information instantaneously, the consumer and the buyer at the same time. TikTok, as you mentioned earlier, has also really kind of thrown the profession for a loop, I'll say. Because here are all these like sudden viral moments where if you don't have the product in place by the time you're able to kind of place an order and get the items that you'll need to do that, it might have already passed.
Right. I think that's fascinating, right? Because like when you're a buyer and these trends are kind of coming at you like a train, how do you respond to that? And how do you decide which ones to back and which ones to let go by?
I mean, these viral moments can really throw a complete wrench into a buyer's plans because I would say typically you would want to operate on at least a 3-month lead time in terms of product. So by the time I place an order, I would expect it to take about 3 months before it hits my warehouse. With a lot of these viral moments, you're challenged to get it in a week's time. So it'll generally come down from leadership as kind of we need to get on this immediately. You will interact with your designer on like a quick sketch, send it off to the supplier. The supplier will not have time to send you a sample back. So the supplier will send you maybe a CAD or something to look at, maybe a swatch of material, something like that. And then you're going to have to place your order and place your bet based on very, very little information. So I think things like sizing and fit and quality really suffer in those situations because buyers aren't able to do that kind of QA that they are used to doing when they do their regular seasonal development. And certainly consumers feel the brunt of that as well.
I think the other issue, and sort of sticking with the consumer for a minute, it does kind of fascinate me as well, this bombardment of trends for the consumer. And what we see when we kind of dig into our data a lot of the time is that a lot of the viral and social media trends are often a trend that has actually been around for really quite a long time, and it's just repackaged and rebranded with some sort of TikTok speak and a snappy dance video.
Yeah. I think I have like so much empathy, not only for the consumer, but also for the buyer. I think it's especially when like social media really kind of takes a turn on something, it may or may not be like something that will actually stick around. So like millennials, I don't blame them for feeling like maybe skinny jeans will come back. Like, should I just hold on to my skinnies until that moment?
Spoiler alert, they will.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think for both buyers and for consumers, I think they're having to grapple with assessing the longevity of a lot of these social trends and trying to figure out what they do need to jump on and what they can kind of wait and see a little bit on. And again, like when it comes to buyers, especially, like you have to make decisions based on thousands and thousands of dollars of inventory. So I definitely empathize with that type of decision they have to make.
Right, absolutely. And I suppose there's so many ways of looking at forecasting and so many more tools that we have at our disposal as an industry. And at WGSN, we would use our STEPIC methodology, for example, which is society, technology, the environment, politics, industry, and creativity. And that's the kind of framework with which we do our longer term forecasting. But what it offers us is a really useful benchmark to look at, okay, well, what is the kind of relative longevity of some of these trends when we really start to assess it via what's going on in the world in the future? And it helps us to differentiate what are those trends with longevity versus what are the kind of viral noise. And then, of course, we have a lot of AI data forecasting as well. But as a buyer, what do buyers in the industry right now, how are they making that separation?
Yeah, I'll say a lot of it is based on gut instinct. So they have their internal data, which is sales data that they're getting back on a weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly basis. They are digging through that back and forth to try to get an understanding of what their customer is actually looking for. But when it comes to that future projection and trying to figure out what's likely to happen, that decision is based on gut.
Right. And that can be a tough call to make. And I'd imagine quite stressful as well. How does that feel as a buyer?
Yes. Yeah. I think there are a lot of people who are told that they have a good eye or that they have a good gut, and they kind of pride themselves of like making the best educated guess that they can. But there are moments where everybody has a fumble. It never fully pans out the way that you plan it, no matter how much information you're able to take in at the beginning. But yes, it is an extremely stressful profession. We are constantly assessing ourselves against the plan that we put forward. So anytime where you're missing that plan, or you're not, even when you're just not exceeding that plan, you are getting scrutinized every step of the way. And what usually happens is, if you are missing your plan on 1 week, that tends to cascade. So you are missing your plan throughout that entire season, and you are just getting further and further scrutinized by leadership as to why you continue to miss the plan. So it's stressful to make the gut decision in the first place, but then it's also stressful to have to combat and try to fix things, I guess, in season as well.
Yeah. And I guess, much as we kind of talk about these like little viral moments that you may want to chase after, but actually it's kind of too late and the world moves on to the next trend, you also don't want to go the other way, right? So you don't want to underestimate a trend. I mean, what happens in that situation?
Yeah, then you are setting yourself up for a very stressful chase scenario. So you might be able to get an injection of product right when that trend is still happening, but then you're out of it immediately, and you'll have to speak to that missed opportunity within your trading meetings and explain why you missed that opportunity. You're further chasing down your suppliers to try to get inventory in, which usually involves air freight, which is oftentimes more expensive than the profit you would be making back on that item anyway. So you're actually making a loss, but you're just trying to satisfy a demand. So yeah, it's an extremely stressful position to not be able to accurately map that opportunity up front. And really, there's currently not much that a buyer has at their disposal to really get that opportunity sizing accurately the first time.
So I'd now like to sort of cast our minds forward a little bit and just get your perspective on how do you see as sort of like an optimistic view of buying? I mean, by all means, throw in the challenges there as well of where you see buying going in the next few years.
I still think it's an extremely exciting profession. I think there's a lot of people who are maybe a little bit nervous that in advances in technology, for example, that the buying profession will become automated in a way. And I personally don't think that's possible. I think it's such a multifaceted role and buyers wear so many hats that there's no possible way that with current technology that's available that a buying profession is anywhere close to being automated. What I do see happening is that there are tools that enable buyers to make decisions in a much more informed way and in a much quicker way. So for example, if I had some of the AI tools that are available today when I was a buyer, I could see myself getting through kind of like my data analysis in a much quicker, more efficient way. And that would have freed my mind up to make more of these creative decisions and spend more time in those other facets of buying while being able to still feel like I went back and forth through that data. So really, I think about it kind of like Rachel Green and the advent of the computer, really. It's sort of like every sort of step in technology is making the profession bigger and better and stronger and faster. But I think the essence of what the buyer is and the essence of what they bring to that business is still very like solidly there.
As a buyer, how are buyers sort of thinking about tracking where a trend is and thinking, when do I go? When is this right for my customer?
As a buyer, you are the voice of the consumer within that assortment process, right? So I always took that very close to heart. And for a buyer, oftentimes that means feeling like a little bit of a wet blanket when everybody's very excited about something that's very new. It might mean stepping up and just raising your hand and saying, hey, like our customer's not there yet. And it's hard to be that voice in the room when everybody is really excited about something. But you do have to remain lockstep with your customer. A lot of that information comes from the previous sales history. Like you are able to glean a lot of tidbits of what your customer is like from what they purchase. But a lot of buyers, participate in a lot of field visits. So we go out to the stores, we talk to people there. We also want to make sure that like region by region, we're understanding the differences between each customer in that place. We do a lot of focus groups as well. And then I have been at a lot of companies that have really made great use of crowdsourced testing. So we would actually take our designs and show them to customers before we produce them to say, do you like this? Like, is this something you would be willing to pay for? And if so, how much? So there's a lot of things that buyers can really do to stay in touch with the consumer. And buyers are also, if something is a little bit too new, they are able to work with a designer, pair a design back into something that could be tested in smaller quantities and then kind of chased into thereafter. So if we are able to get some traction with the customer, let's devise a strategy where we can do a little bit and then be able to meet that demand more full on later. But yes, in terms of like customization to a customer, having that innovator, mass, and conservative segmentation from WGSN, I think is super impactful because it is a lot of the times where when we look at that segmentation, it might be being driven by the innovator segment, or it might be being driven by a conservative segment. And as a buyer, to be able to know that and be able to kind of calibrate what I'm doing because of that, I think would be kind of a game changer in terms of whether or not I'm and how I play my strategy with that particular item.
You're listening to the WGSN podcast, Create Tomorrow. We're talking about WGSN's brand new fashion buying service designed by buyers for buyers. It's your go-to spot for all buying specific forecasts and insights tailored to your product to market lifecycle. I'm your host, Francesca Muston, VP of WGSN Fashion, and I'm joined by Monisha Klar, Fashion Director at WGSN. Okay, Monisha. So some of our listeners may be not aware at all of WGSN, and you've been with our business for about 18 months now, getting on for. And during that time, you have enabled us to really ramp up our service offering for buyers. And this month, we have launched a brand new platform for buyers. So I wonder if you could just spend a bit of time now just setting out like what you've done and how you have kind of helped us to get this off the ground.
Sure. So within the buying world, there is a lot of awareness about WGSN. And I think so many buyers have had some sort of interaction with WGSN across their career already. Usually, it's a design partner who's kind of brought you into that world, shown you a buyer's briefing or something, a report from our platform. So buyers, I think there's always been an appetite for WGSN type of content. Certainly all the ones that I had read as a buyer were extremely useful in my day-to-day. But in terms of like speaking directly to the buyer, it wasn't something that we had done before. So when we went about devising this platform, we really wanted to make sure that we're capturing the essence of the workflow and making sure that we are understanding all the different milestones that are going into that buying life cycle throughout the season, and making sure that we are kind of tailoring that content to each piece of that life cycle. So the number one thing that you'll see on the new platform is that we've organized it according to phases of that kind of development calendar. So we have our preseason planning phase, development, in-season, and hindsight. And then we also have a separate section for director's intelligence for the leader of that team. And I think what that does is it helps buyers find the WGSN content that is likely to help them within that specific moment in time, which is super helpful, right? Because you're able to have a task at hand that you're working on, find the report that is most likely to help you with that task, and be able to take that information in instantaneously. The other thing that I think is super impactful about our platform is we combined it with our Trend Curve AI predictive analytics. So we have several report types. We have a category outlook that will tell you within the dresses category, for example, what is likely to be that 2-year projection out into the future. We have item-based outlooks, so we're able to do it for a specific item to show that 2-year projection as well. And then we recently started 2 new Trend Curve AI reports, which is details. So we just did one on bows, for example, as well as color. So color, I think, was also a super impactful one in terms of that preseason planning phase, right? Because you're able to kind of predict those colors 2 years out. So all of those predictive analytics, I feel like is really the bread and butter and the kind of game-changing element here for buyers, because as buyers, we are knee-deep in our internal data, but it is all historical. So we are reading that back to front and making sure that we understand what has happened. But then in terms of that future, we're making that gut instinct call. We're trying to kind of make a conjecture about what is likely to happen based on the past. So our predictive analytics is able to actually give you that projection. So it's not such a guessing game anymore in terms of being able to see where this is likely to go. And obviously, we know that those forecasts are not a certainty, right? So we're giving them a confidence interval as well. So we're showing them like this is the range in which you can expect your result to actualize. And I think that would have been super helpful, especially for my financial planning that I would have to do around an assortment.
So we've got the AI reports. Do you want to pick out any other highlights from the buying platform? Any other reports that are worth just mentioning to any buyers who are out there?
Yeah, so we have developed a whole new suite of reports as well. So 2 of them that I think are just really, really exciting. First one would be TikTok trading. So as we spoke about, these social media moments give buyers such anxiety. So what we've really tried to do is break down these TikTok trends into what are actually those key items and how would you go about looking at them within your assortment. And I think the answer 99% of the time is through remerchandising. For these items to actually hit this peak level of viral content, they have to be based on items that are readily available for most consumers. So when we look at these TikTok trends, we're seeing mostly items that are likely to be in an assortment already. So it's kind of about putting them together within specific looks and putting those key items all together. There's a bit of styling element that goes into there, a bit of marketing that would go into there around the trend, making sure that you're using the correct terminology when you're speaking to your customer with it. But really, this TikTok trading report is able to kind of capture those strategies that you can implement in an immediate way, and hopefully not have to produce, subpar product on an incredibly expensive air freight cost. The second type of report that I also want to call out is trend narratives. So trend narratives was based off of an exercise that I know to be true within the buying world. And it's that storytelling element that a director is likely to kind of set up for his or her team at the top of the season. WGSN content has always kind of played a key role into that. So as a director previously, I would look at WGSN's forecasts and kind of see, well, what am I likely to make into like a monthly story for my buyers to then kind of have as their North Star as they're putting together their assortment. So that's what we've done here is we've taken those product forecasts, we've broken them down into monthly actionable commercial concepts. And this can kind of form the basis of what that commercial calendar is likely to be, as well as the basis of your assortment. So it's giving you key items, positioning, color, all of that kind of really meaty context that you'll need in order to kind of bring these stories to life.
Amazing. Thank you. Okay. So as a buyer, when you log into the WGSN platform, what are some of those actions that you're going to be doing? Like, how are you practically going to be taking this information and using it to help you in your job? What's it doing for you?
Let's say I am a buyer and I am kicking off a brand new season. So I'm very much into that preseason planning phase. So one of the first things that I might do is have a look at trend narratives, have a look at those kind of trend stories that are likely to kick off. The other thing I would do is immediately go to the Trend Curve AI category outlook. So if you are a buyer, you will be able to find your specific category directly in there. So let's say I'm in the dresses category. I would immediately go to that category outlook for dresses and be able to see where my category is likely to go within this next season, but also the trajectory 2 years out. Within that, I can also be able to see some of those key styles and key items within that dresses category. So I'll be able to see all my A-line dresses, all my shift dresses, all of those styles, and be able to see their forecasts as well in terms of innovator, mass, and conservative. So that I feel like would really ground me alongside my internal data, but that would really ground me about where am I likely to go in that phase. When I shift over into the development phase, so that's when I'm getting into that kind of active nitty gritty detail with my designer. There's a lot of back and forth on those types of elements. What I would then be looking for from WGSN, which is what we put into that development section, is stuff that is very item based and very detail focused. So Key Items Fashion is a great report for that. It's giving me kind of those must-have items. Core Item Update is another great one there because it's showing me for my kind of perennial items, how am I actually moving those on from season to season? And then I also think the collection reviews are also very impactful because I'm seeing what's happening on the runway. I'm getting a breakdown of what each one of those collections are, and I'm seeing if there's any kind of tidbits that I want to pull in from those. Then as I kind of progress to that next phase of in-season and hindsight, so my product is now actively selling and actively trading. So TikTok trading would be a great impactful one there because I would be able to kind of make tweaks and actions there. And then when I get into that kind of hindsight phase, there's a lot of different resources here. So we have our retail analysis, which is our team travels all over the world, kind of capturing photos from all the kind of retail formats across the globe, but also we're taking an in-depth look at the e-commerce data that's kind of coming out of there. So I'm both being able to see what's happened around the world and also get an idea of how things materialize throughout the course of the season. The buyer's debrief is a very comprehensive hindsight document that will also allow me to kind of benchmark my performance against the rest of the industry. And yeah, I mean, that would kind of take me through a full seasonal cycle there.
Thank you to my guest, Monisha Klar, Director of WGSN Fashion. If you're a WGSN subscriber, look out for more WGSN fashion forecasts available at WGSN.com. And if you're not a subscriber, please come and discover our services. We're constantly publishing new content focusing on how we can design a brighter, better future for our industries, which include interiors, food and drink, beauty, consumer tech, and sports and outdoor. We'll be back in 2 weeks for our next episode. In the meantime, you can catch the CEO of WGSN, Carla Busashi, next week on our other podcast, Lives of Tomorrow, where she'll be joined by fashion brand Button Scarves CEO, Linda Angrea, discussing the future of modest wear. I'm your host, Francesca Muston. Be sure to follow and subscribe to this podcast, and see you next time.